Bobby Charles is about to speak right now, so we want to cut into that. He is one of the Republicans running for that governor seat. We'll take a listen.
Final certified result, 9 days. No other state uses this process in its primaries. Only 3 use it at all. And no state suffers this kind of wait. States like Florida, with 13.4 million registered voters versus our 949,000, count every vote on election night. They have winners before midnight. After endless litigation trying to stop it, Maine's government stands alone, the only state in the United States foolish enough to use it in their primaries. A quick recap. The legislature killed ranked choice voting in 2009. It killed it again in 2013. Democrat and Republican leaders both raised constitutional questions in 2016. The Maine Supreme Court in 2017 observed that the Maine Constitution requires a plurality. Then in 2017, legislation put off the RCV process until the Maine Constitution could be amended. And if it was not, which requires a supermajority, then after December 21, 2021, if there was no amendment, the system was literally nullified. But as most know, that's not what happened. What happened is a series of citizen activity to get a citizen's veto. There was legislation, there was a Superior Court decision which confirmed it, Supreme Court decision which reversed that. We basically have had gobbledygook in this process all the way up to the moment where we are today. In short, the RCV system has led to chaos, confusion, distrust, and now, in the most recent primary election, lots of unnecessary nail-biting, particularly on the Democrat side, for a week and a half of uncertainty. Bluntly, Maine voters deserve better. This system just does not work. It has been delayed, unwieldy, it is impractical, it is unconstitutional. And I say that as a former law clerk on the U.S. Court of Appeals, especially by reference to our country's and our state's founding. It just needs to end. As governor, I will make sure that this never happens again. Now let me give you 5 very basic and rather unique arguments right now that I'd like everybody to just think about. First, it has been 9 days and counting. No state takes that long in its primary votes. And no state uses an algorithm to redistribute votes in a cascading set of preferences with up to 8 votes per voter in this cycle. This is patently absurd. No voter should have to wait 9 days to find out who won the primary election. This is not a close presidential race. This is a state primary. It should take a few hours, not 2 weeks. We have computers. That's how that works. Moreover, every day that passes without a result is another day that trust erodes. Voters start to wonder. They start to question. Once doubt sets in, it is hard to roll it back. People begin not to trust the process. That's a critical piece of a democracy, of a republic. You have to trust the process. It never used to be this way. For 200 years, it was not this way. Ranked choice voting has done this to Maine, sowing doubt, distrust, and disenchantment with elections. So first, enough is enough. Second, the irregularities only deepen our doubt. If humanity is imperfect, and it always is, we can do better. This week, we watched these irregularities, no one of which likely decided anything, but all of which created doubt play out. Biddeford sent the wrong memory stick. Bodenham's thumb drive malfunctioned and had to be rescanned. Bath forgot to send its drive entirely, and law enforcement had to be dispatched to retrieve it. These are predictable consequences of a system that requires collecting materials from nearly 500 towns and counties and cities across the entire state of Maine, transporting them, processing them, running multiple rounds of tabulation before anybody knows who's won. In engineering terms, every one of those steps is a failure point. Every failure point is a reason for voters to lose faith. And Maine keeps building more failure points into the system every single cycle. Third, in legal terms, we are witnessing a factual conflict of interest. The Secretary of State, legally charged with overseeing Maine's elections, is a candidate for those elections. Recusal from direct involvement does not change the chain of command. Ethically, in other states, candidates running for office and serving as Secretary of State offer detailed written policies codifying their removal from the process. You can go look for those. They're there. Maine voters received no such document, no formal written guardrails, no binding commitment. Maine voters are again asked to trust the process with a structural conflict and a person who has a habit of observable bias. That is wrong. As governor, I will push for laws that make sure this can never happen again. Just as a governor should not have indefinite emergency powers, and I'll sign that bill, a Secretary of State should not be able to oversee an election in which she is a candidate. Fourth, in this gubernatorial cycle, RCV gives a free pass to the unaffiliated candidate for governor, in this case Rick Bennett. While the two major parties are locked in a drawn-out process, out of their control, waiting for results, unable to pivot to the general, the third-party candidate, today Rick Bennett, tomorrow someone else, is out there running around Maine completely unencumbered. Let me remind voters who Rick Bennett is and why that advantage hurts both eventual major party candidates. Bennett voted in the Democratic primary. He is not an independent. For the record, he is also not an outsider. He is an Augusta establishment individual in different clothes. Ranked choice voting's delay has handed him a free week and a half of runway that Republicans and Democrats do not enjoy. He is defining himself against his opponents while they have no runway. The system hobbles the major parties, giving fringe candidates more room to operate. That is not a system that works, however you cut it, for the majority of Maine voters. Finally, this whole process is costly, not just in time, but in dollars. In 2018, ranked choice voting cost Maine taxpayers $440,000 in additional costs, over and above normal election expenses. That is one cycle. This year's primary involved more races, more candidates, greater complexity, more failure points. Many taxpayers, indeed all Maine taxpayers, are paying more money for a process that takes longer, creates confusion, unfortunately sows distrust in the outcome, and needless uncertainty day to day. That is not a good deal for the people of Maine. As governor, I will work to repeal ranked choice voting in Maine primaries and replace it with a system that delivers clear results on election night. One person, one vote, a plurality or majority, win that evening. That simple system worked without complaint for 200 years. No constitutional challenges, no needless.
So you've been listening to Bobby Charles there. He is one of the Republicans hoping to be on the ballot come November for governor.
Charles had the highest percentage of votes coming out on primary night, which was just over a week ago. I want to bring in Phil Hirschkorn, the host of Political Brew, for a quick analysis of what we were just hearing now live from Bobby Charles.
Yeah, it's kind of puzzling because he's well into the lead, and most people who are watching this process think he might just win. So I don't know what all the sour grapes are about, except that Republicans in the state of Maine have always not accepted ranked choice voting. And Bobby is not alone in having told, for example, his supporters, just rank me first, one and done, and don't even engage. We'll see in a couple hours when we get the final results, we think, how many Republicans did participate in ranking a second and a third or a fourth choice, and that may affect the final results. But as you said, Bobby's got 38% of the vote. The next two candidates, Ben Midgley and Jonathan Bush, have only 20%. I mean, he's up.
This is from Tuesday.
That's right. Here's a frozen moment in time of the first round, which in Bobby Charles' view, well, this should be it, right? He's up 22,463 votes. Maybe insurmountable. We'll see how these second choice votes of the lower candidates are allocated round by round, and if Bobby holds his lead or not. We can all speculate on that, but it's a much larger lead than in the Democratic primary. There are 487 polling stations in Maine, and it's the law that law enforcement has to go pick them up. I think he said a few things that we could maybe challenge a little bit. For example, he talked about irregularities, trying to sow seeds of doubt in the results. Yes, there were a few glitches, as he mentioned correctly, a few thumb drives. One town they had to go back and get the paper ballots to rescan them and check the count, but this is the normal process of supervising an election. Look, he's frustrated that it's 9 days out. We're frustrated, right? We were here 9 days ago hoping we could, throw some confetti and declare a winner, but we didn't get to do that. That's the process that Maine has. It's not unconstitutional. This has been litigated over and over again. It's been upheld. It's not constitutional for the general election according to the Maine Supreme Court and the Maine Constitution, where we will have just a plurality and we won't have ranked choice voting as we do in the primaries. So, so there's that. He criticized Secretary of State Jenna Bellows for overseeing the election, but in fact, she has recused herself. I don't recall her doing it formally in a letter. That's true. He has a point there, but she's not involved in supervising this election. The two deputy secretaries of states are who we'll see later on, Kate McBride and Julie Flynn, who's run elections for 30 years.
Who are technically the next in line people.
That's right. And so she's not involved. Should she have done it sooner? Probably. Should she have resigned her position? Well, some Republicans think so, but they don't like her for other reasons and other actions she's taken against the Trump administration.
And his point probably was that they do still work under her, despite her being recused.
I don't know anyone that's seen her in the building. I mean, we don't know what communications are going on.
Right, she's not involved in this.
Until we got close to the balloting, she was still the boss. Probably involved in some of the preparations, but this is fairly routine stuff year in and year out. The other thing I wanted to address was Bobby Charles said that Rick Bennett, who's the one independent on the ballot, the only one, there were about 3 or 4 who were trying, he was the only one that got enough signatures by June to qualify for the November ballot. I don't know how much of a weak head start in the general election. Bobby was complaining about that. That's his right to say so. But look, like all of them, Rick Bennett's been running for over a year. We've been covering him all throughout 2026. He's had plan after plan after plan, housing, healthcare, childcare, energy. I was with him last night at a house party in Portland. Mayor Dion of Portland was there. Other notable people were there. Supporters were there. The curious were there. He does 2 of those every week. So this notion that he has an unfair strategic advantage in the 5 months ahead, I don't know. People have to decide for themselves, but I don't really see that. Though I take his point. He's frustrated that he has to sit on the sidelines.
Everybody else basically is waiting
and not declare victory.
Right.
I mean, he'd like to declare victory, and maybe he's lost his patience. I understand that because he may be the winner in a couple hours, but we'll see.
Okay.
All right, and well, of course, we're tracking the results. We have Christian Harsa in Augusta who is watching all of this unfold. And we will be back on air once those results start to come in. We'll have Phil and we'll have Rob Caldwell joining us
To walk you through all those details. Phil, thanks for joining us for a little
sure
breakdown. We'll be right back.